Good evening, everyone. I'm Riley King, and welcome to this special right here on the Riley King Network. Christopher McAuliffe, a legacy endorsed Shuttle Challenger. Let's get started. Remembering the diverse crew of Shuttle Challenger. The 7-member crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger was hauled for its diversity: male, female, white, black, Asian American, and Christian, and Jewish. Here is a brief look at the astronauts who died aboard the Challenger 30 years ago. Christopher McAuliffe, Ronald McNair, Ellis Orsiak, Judith Roskeen, Francis Dick Scooby, Michael Smith, and George Jarvis. Challenger effects on America. Space flight were felt then, still seen today. When the Shuttle Challenger exploded, it affected everybody in America and many people around the world. But the University of New Hampshire professor Charles Smith felt it a bit differently. He lost his job. As astronauts scrambled to replace 1/4 of its shuttle fleet, it pulled back funding from many other projects, including a UNH project on solar wind, where Smith was a research scientist. Smith moved to the University of Delaware, where he researched and taught for 16 years before returning to UNH Institute of Study of Earth, Ocean, and Space in 2013, where his work still concerns solar winds as part of a magnetic fields experiment on the Advanced Comprehensive Explorer spacecraft, measuring and radiation environment sunward of the Earth. He said the change ended up being good news for him and his career, but that doesn't mean it was any less painful at the time. Smith's story is on one explain of how the Challenger explodes, procedure of ripple effects above and beyond, sorrows over loss of life that's still being felt today in America. Space flight, which hasn't had a vehicle big enough to launch humans into space since the shuttle was retired in 2013. America's astronauts are carried to space stations on Zorialto rocket launch from a former Soviet launched in Karzayanta. Smith thinks the effort of the Challenger accident combined with the Columbia shuttle disaster 6 years later runs even deeper. Whatever those long-term effects, certainly the Challenger disaster had immediately effects throughout the space science community. Many projects were delayed or cut, including many that had no observance connections to shuttle flights. The shuttle was carried to carry the center rocket and modified second stage of the Atlantis rockets that sent men to the moon, so they could launch probes to planets or deeper space from low Earth orbit. Timeline of events around the Challenger disaster. 1968, NASA began to study designs of cheaper system to take people into orbit. 1972, use of solid coolant to lift shuttle into space rather than liquid pellets is accepted for design of the cost reasons. Rocket booster involves multiple segments sailed with the O-rings. 1976, NASA unveils the shuttle. 1977, concerns first raised that the O-rings may not prevent releases of hot gases during launch. 1978, Christa McAuliffe moves to Concord from Maryland when her husband Stephen gets a job as Assistant State Attorney General. 1981, Columbia is the first shuttle launched to orbit. 1983, McAuliffe begins teaching social studies at Concord High School after stints teaching history and English in Bow and Concord Middle Schools. April 4th, 1983, Madden launched the Challenger shuttle. August 27, 1984, President Ronald Reagan announced the Teacher in Space project. More than 11,000 teachers apply. Christa McAuliffe legacy endorsed. Teachers recall the day of the Challenger disaster. Jane Voss Pulaski can still picture the students jumping up and down. She can hear the cheers of the seniors in a nearby auditorium. Lisa Boffinger remembers the rows of desks in the science lab, the students with their eyes turned on the TV screen in front of the room. And all of a sudden, there's silence, Boffinger said, and there's a piece of the shuttle falling down, and the kids all turned to me and said, "What happened?" At 11:39 a.m. on January 28, 1986, Boffinger and Voss Pulaski were young teachers in their second year at Concord High School. They were watching in their classrooms when the Space Shuttle Challenger launched above Florida's Kennedy Space Center, then suddenly exploded with its 7 crew members. The disaster took from their ranks the woman selected from 11,000 to be the first civilian in outer space, Christa McAuliffe. 30 years later, her 2 colleagues are still living out her most famous words at her own school. "We touch the future," Voss Pulaski said, "and we keep on going. They remember the sadness of that day, but they keep going because the solidarity that followed. My memories at Concord in those years are why I'm still here, she said. Job offers, opportunities elsewhere, this is home. A community I wanted. Boffinger grew up in Concord and graduated in 1977 with no intentions of coming back to Concord High School, but she was looking for student teaching gigs when a part-time job opened at her alma mater in 1984. She took it. Fresh from graduate school, Voth had a handful of job offers at area schools, but she had been hoping for a call from Concord. When it came, she didn't hesitate. That spring, NASA chose McAuliffe for the Challenger mission. McAuliffe taught history. Both Boffinger and Voth taught science. They barely overlapped with her time at Concord High School because she spent much of the next months preparing for the trip. Voth watched her colleague demonstrating her training on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. She recalled that lovely pull you in, suck you in smile. There's no better diplomat to show us what teachers can be, Voth said. That year had been a difficult one. Less than 2 months before the Challenger launched, a student named Lewis Carter brought a gun to school, took 2 students hostage, and was eventually killed by police. It all happened right near Boffinger's classroom. Concord High's year. As smoke cleared off the coast of Florida, a high school in New Hampshire relayed. Boffinger said she couldn't watch fireworks for years. Teachers threw away their classroom TVs. Students, in particular, seniors, questioned the cause of the accident and looked for answers. On a plane visit, her mother, that February, Voth wondered mid-flight if she was higher than the space shuttle had been. But they weren't alone in grief. Students released balloons into the sky. Letters and flowers arrived, postmarked from other states, from other countries. Ronald Reagan offered to give a commencement address, but Principal Charles Foley, who had barely bared the press from the building as soon as the shuttle went up in flames, said no. Boffinger said Foley delivered the speech himself. A special place. McAuliffe was 37 when she died. Where she still lived, alive. She'd likely be retired by now, like many of her former colleagues. Boffinger was 26 that year. Voth was 25. They are now 2 senior teachers at Concord High School, the only 2 who remain from the 1986 yearbook. First grade from around the world wrote, "We love teacher Krista," but in Concord, she was still Miss McAuliffe to her students. As the 30-year anniversary approaches, Voth got interview requests, including one of the Japanese public television documentaries and another for Algiers. A colleague is organizing a panel discussion. The McAuliffe's